Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and yesterday we talked about the water type. We talked about whether or not it was coming back to the metagame with all of the strong new water cards coming in the next mini set, releasing in just a few days. Secluded Springs is the name of it. At the end of that video, what we did was we kind of built a bunch of different deck lists using some of those new cards, but it was only for the water type. So today we're going to actually do the same thing because some of you guys really liked that, and maybe this will be helpful or useful to you guys when the set releases, and you're going to go ahead and build some decks using those cards that you open in the new pack. So today we're going to build deck lists. That's what we're going to do here. We have some things that that I have off the top of my head that I want to try to test out or build here. We are on PokemonMeta.com, and their deck builder tool link will be down in the description below. This is a really cool website for a lot of reasons, but they do update their card list early, which is nice. So we do have some of those new cards. So like I said yesterday, we talked a lot about Suicune and Mantike because it was all about the water type and if the water type was really coming back to the metagame. But there's a lot of other new cards that are also, or that have also been announced here. Today, we're probably going to focus around Raikou and Entei EX. These are two of the other legendary beast Pokemon that are coming in Secluded Springs. And I think that even though Suicune is sort of the front runner, it's the mascot of the set, I do think Raikou and Entei are both really strong Pokemon, and I think that they deserve some mention here. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, is building decks using these two Pokemon. Maybe we'll build a Slowking deck or something as well, but I think there's a lot of potential here for all of these different cards. And let's dive right into it, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below if there's anything or any ideas that you had for decks for these new cards that we don't build today. Again, the other thing to mention is that we don't have the full set list yet, so there's probably going to be some really broken, important cards that are going to be valuable to these decks that we just don't know about yet. So when the set does release, of course, we're going to come back and then we'll talk about more decks, as people sort of actually play the game when the new cards come out. So anyway, keep that in mind. Take everything with a grain of salt here. These lists aren't going to be, probably super optimal because the set isn't even out yet, but just to kind of get the ideas rolling here. So the first thing that we'll do here probably is we'll talk about Raikou because I think Raikou is probably one of the more underrated Pokemon here coming. And I think that a lot of people kind of sleeping on Raikou. I think that the 130 HP, whereas the other legendary beasts have 140, is a little bit tough, and the attack is definitely a bit weaker than Entei's and Suicu's attack, but it's not a bad Pokemon whatsoever. The lightning type has a ton of support right now, whether it's Oricorio or Pikachu or Zeraora. I think that Raikou's going to have a lot of backup, and I think that there's definitely a possibility that this card becomes very meta viable, even though at first glance it doesn't seem that strong. I still don't think it's a bad Pokemon whatsoever. So again, 130 HP, very similar to like when we had Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. Zapdos just had 130 and the others had 140. Retreat cost of 2. This is probably the number one thing that I wish wasn't the case with Raikou. I think it just kind of goes against what most lightning type Pokemon are, which is lower HP, lower retreat cost, and lower, I guess, attack costs normally as well. But anyway, I feel like Raikou should have a retreat cost of 1, but that's just me. Anyway, Legendary Pulse. So this card will be drawing cards while it is in the active spot, the same as Entei and Raikou. So it's going to be a decent leadoff option. A 2 energy attack cost means that on turn 2, if we're going second, this Pokemon is going to be very relevant. But just like the other Pokemon, like Suicune and Entei, you probably want to pair it with its respective baby Pokemon so that if we do go first, we have an option to still attack on turn 2. On the attack here, Voltaic Bullet, 60 damage for 2 lightning energies, and it only does 10 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Now, again, that's only 70 total, and this doesn't have the ability to kind of scale up to like 120 like Entei and Suicune do, but I do feel like this is still a strong attack. 60 damage on your second turn and 10 damage to the bench is definitely a bit underrated. It's not like a ton of damage, but it's early damage, it's consistent damage, and then, of course, that 10 damage to the bench, I think, is actually a lot of a bigger deal than some people might think. It allows us to basically target Pokemon that are on our opponent's bench to then bring up with Cyrus later in the game, and I think that is going to be a very valuable strategy for Raikou. So anyway, that's Raikou. Let's build some decks. So 2 copies of Raikou I think is kind of most important here, and I think the first deck that we're going to build is probably more similar to like what a Turbo Lightning deck is in the format right now, which, to be fair, is some of the best decks or this season have been these sort of Turbo, fast-paced, Lightning type decks. And when I say Turbo, I really mean decks that are playing like baby Pokemon, because that's how these decks are played, is just sort of these really early combos and attacking really early, and that energy acceleration is really important. The lightning type just happens to have a bunch of it, so what we're going to do is definitely add 2 Pikachu, because I think that Pikachu is not only really good with Oricorio and of course Arceus and Silvally in this season right now, But I think it'll be also good for Raikou. So if we're going second, we can lead Raikou, right, which is totally fine. We can just attach, put it in the active spot, draw a card, and the next turn attack. And we're going to go +1, I guess, draw, and then we're also going to be able to attack turn 2. But if we go first, we do have Pichu, which is going to be really valuable. And I also feel like right now in this season, most people are either playing Pichu and Oricorio with things like Silvally or Arceus. And honestly, I feel like Raikou is more taking the place of Silvally in this type of an archetype than it is Arceus, so I still want to include Arceus because, you know, Raikou doesn't have the opportunity or the ability to deal a bunch of damage, but Arceus does, and I think that's a number one key point here. I think that the synergies between Raikou and Arceus is actually pretty high, mainly for one thing in particular, which is going to be electrical cord. So this interaction I'm really high on. So electrical cord, you attach it to Raikou, and then if Raikou gets KO'd by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, then those 2 energies that are attached to Raikou can go to your benched Pokemon, which is really valuable. I think that that's a really important thing here. I believe it splits them, if we're being entirely honest with you. Let me look this up so I don't get this wrong. I think you can only choose one. Let me get this right. If it's KO'd by an attack, move 2 energy from that Pokemon and attach 1 energy to each of your 2 bench Pokemon. Yeah. Okay. So this means we're probably going to also want to play Cord, right? Or not Cord. We're also going to want to play Switch. So we can go like here and play Elemental Switch. So let's play 2 of those. And then since we're playing Elemental Switch, I probably also want to play Zeraora. And now this creates a really fast-paced, a really aggressive deck list. But now we already have 12 cards taken from the deck list, and we definitely want to play Pokeball and Research, right? Let's go ahead and put a ball in here, or a couple Pokeballs. And then we want Professor's Research. Of course, these are staple cards. We need them in the deck list. Now, this only leads 16 cards in the deck, which is pretty tough. And we're playing 8 Pokemon, but the thing is, we're also playing Arceus, right? So to me, right off the top of my head, we have a lot of things that we want to do that we can't necessarily do, right? We also probably want to play Oricorio, but that makes things a little bit tough, right? So let's just say, for right now, we're actually building a Turbo Lightning deck without Oricorio, which probably isn't the smartest move, but we're going to go ahead and try to do that. Now, we are playing Raikou and Arceus, which means we probably want to have some way to retreat out if we don't lead with the correct Pokemon. So I am going to play 2 copies of Leaf here, and then what I'm probably also going to do is play Cyrus, at least 1 copy, probably just because we are doing bench damage with Raikou, and it's probably going to be important for us to be able to capitalize on that, to bring up a Pokemon to take that KO. So we could play 2 copies of Cyrus, and then right here could be a really aggressive, a really fast-paced lightning type deck. It allows us to go Pichu into Raikou, or lead with Raikou, set it up with Zeraora and Elemental Switch, or lead with Arceus and maybe also get that set up with Zeraora, but probably we're going to be going Pichu into Arceus or Pichu into Raikou, or we could, again, just lead Raikou going second and then, you know, lead off with it, and then, I guess, transition from Raikou into Arceus to kind of finish the games here. Again, not much room for Oricorio, which is definitely a little bit of a downside for sure, but I do think that this would be a very fast-paced, very aggressive deck list. Now, the other thing that we could do here is we could include Oricorio, but change things around a little bit, right? So I'm actually going to remove the electrical cord here, and we're going to add Oricorio. This will be definitely more of an Oricorio-based deck. And I guess we're playing 10 Pokemon here, which is just kind of a lot. And we probably want to play some tool cards. So let's kind of thin this out a little bit. We are playing Zeraora, but I think maybe we just cut 1 Zeraora and we cut 1 Energy Switch because we don't have electrical cord. So that whole point of the strategy is maybe a little bit less relevant. And then we could probably also just cut maybe 1 Arceus. So now we're playing 8 total Pokemon, all basic Pokemon. So that should be enough for Arceus, 1 Elemental Switch, which I think is probably fine. We could probably get away with only playing 1 Leaf, and we probably still want to keep 2 Cyrus. So now what we could probably do is play things like a Giant Cape or 2. And then also what we could do, I suppose, is maybe have some more tech supporter cards included in here, like a Guzma could be interesting. Maybe we add a Guzma, why not, right? And then we could just play something like a Mars, which I think could be interesting. So this is another version. Again, very similar decks. I think a lot of the decks that Raikou will be inserted in are going to be very similar to the decks that are seeing play right now in terms of being fast-paced lightning-type deck lists. Now, again, I don't know if I'm going to build like a Raikou Silvally deck, because in my mind, these are both Pokemon that are very similar. Now, you could play Pichu and Silvally and Raikou, and that could be a totally fine deck list. But honestly, I think if we're playing Raikou and we're playing the Turbo Lightning type package here, we probably want to fit Oricorio in some way, which just means we're limited a little bit, right? And then I think a deck list like this is a nice in-between, and it allows us to kind of go from, you know, the traditional kind of, you know, fast-paced lightning type deck with Arceus, but also kind of have, you know, the Oricorio stuff kind of teched in. So this is sort of a mash between the two. Theoretically speaking, we could just cut Arceus in general, and then we could play, you know, okay. Here, we'll back it up a little bit, because there's not that many lightning type archetypes in the game, but there are a few. So let's go ahead And let's try to put something together that's a little bit different than maybe the typical like Turbo Arceus, Turbo Silvally stuff. And I'm actually thinking something like a Pikachu, right? Because Pikachu is in the format right now. And I think that the Pikachu toolbox is actually a little bit underrated, and Raikou fits really well into it. So let's kind of build that out. This is going to be the Pikachu toolbox. I think most Pikachu toolboxes right now are actually playing one copy of both Pikachus, that being Genetic Apex, and then I think it's Shining Revelry Pikachu until we get a third Pikachu EX, I guess. So we're going to do that, and I think they're also playing Oricorio, so we can play 2 copies of Oricorio. And then I would actually also play 2 copies of Pichu. We want a lot of Lightning-type Pokemon in this deck, in fact. Now, let's also probably just play 1 Zeraora, right? Because why not? I think that's probably going to be fine. So that's 9 basic Pokemon. That should be enough for sure. But we are playing, of course, both Pikachus. We're playing we got a lot of fast-paced aggression here. So I think I'm probably going to include another Electrical Cord. And I'm probably also going to grab, or that was an Elemental Switch, but I want that as well. And then I want an Electrical Cord, probably just one of them, perhaps. And then I think what we also want is just 1 Cape, because all of our Pokemon are pretty low in that sense. And then we definitely need our Pokeballs, of course. So let's add those. And our researches, so let's add these as well. And that leads 16 cards in the deck. Makes things a little bit difficult, but again, what we probably want is like an X speed in here, just to more consistently have like a lead off coming off, or maybe we could run 2 X speeds, theoretically speaking. A lot of our Pokemon have a retreat cost of 1. This archetype actually is what makes Raikou a little bit awkward, because again, look at all of these other Lightning-type Pokemon. They all have a retreat cost of 1, and Raikou doesn't. You know what I mean? So, like, if we lead off with it, we probably are just going to, you know, deal with it. You know what I mean? Because we're drawing cards at least. So, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world, but 1 X speed, because why not, right? I think that's probably fine. Maybe we do just play 1 Leaf, you know, just to have some flexibility there. And then what we can do, I guess, is definitely want a Cyrus, and then probably just something else like a Red or something to extend the damage. So this is just like a draft of like a, you know, one of those sort of Pikachu toolbox deck lists. Again, it's a little bit of everything. So it's a mixed bag, but that's what these Pikachu decks are, I think, is just a bunch of Pokemon that all kind of work together to some degree, right? We have Oricorios, we have Pichus, we have Raikous, we have Pikachus, and then we also have like Zeraora, Energy Switch, Electrical Cord. So it's just a mash of basically a bunch of every kind of like supportive lightning type Pokemon in the game. But honestly, I still feel like Arceus is probably like the best partner for these lightning type decks, because Arceus in general is just such a strong card. And I think that it's been better this season than Silvally. And I think that Silvally probably won't see that much play in the lightning type archetypes. Maybe it will. Maybe people will continue to play lightning type Silvally, but if I had to guess, I would say that Raikou might kind of take the spot of Silvally in some of these decks, and it's probably going to lean more towards like kind of the builds that we're seeing right now with like Turbo Arceus and the lightning type Arceus decks this season, and that's kind of what my opinion is going into this next season of what the lightning type archetypes will look like. I would recommend that we probably still play Oricorio, because Oricorio is absolutely busted. So here's what we're going to do for Raikou. The last thing on my mind really is something that's maybe a little bit more tempo based, or maybe a little bit more late game strength focused, which I think could be interesting. So I'm going to cut some of these cards here. We're going to keep Pokeball research. We're going to do all of this. So, okay. We'll cut the Oricorio for now, and we'll cut X-Speed for now. Okay, so here's the other thing that I was thinking of was like Magnezone, right? Because Magnezone is a really strong Pokemon, but the difficulty with Magnezone is that it's a stage 2 Pokemon, and we don't oftentimes like want to play it with Rare Candy, because we need that Magneton. We need that stage 1 middle evolution to accelerate those energies, right? That's definitely really important. And then, of course, because it's a stage 2 Pokemon, we need some way to draw through our deck. And to be fair, I think that Raikou actually operates as a pretty significant partner for Magnezone. So I am going to build a Magnezone deck with Raikou, because I actually feel like there is some decent synergy there. So we're going to do a 2-2 copy of all of these and then 2 Raikous. So now we have a 50-50 chance of either leading Magnemite or leading Raikou. This does take up a lot of spots in our deck, but to be fair, Magnezone is doing a decent amount of damage and it has a lot of HP, but I still feel like we want to be a little bit tanky because this is more of a late game deck. So I'm also going to add back those giant capes. 2 copies kind of seems correct to me. So that's what I want to do here. But I also feel like we can get away with probably just playing 1 Oricorio, because why not? Oricorio is probably going to win us some games here. Now, since we are playing Magnezone, I do like Pokemon Communications, just because we have that middle evolution, and it's a little bit awkward to find and to kind of get the whole evolution line going. We get 2 Pokeballs, we got 2 researches. That leaves 4 cards left for the deck here. What do we want to do here? I guess we can be a little bit standard and we can just play like a Sabrina Cyrus. I'm kind of just filling the gaps right now. But overall, this is going to be more of a slower base deck. Raikou in the active is going to be able to do some consistent damage while also drawing through our deck. Hopefully allows us to kind of either just sort of get the Magnezone off on turn 3, or we can kind of have Raikou to kind of carry the early game and then go into Magnezone, and hopefully that's enough to kind of win the game here. It's an interesting strategy. I don't know if it's really going to work out that way, but this is sort of the idea that I have cooking in my brain right now. We probably also, unless we, like if we lead Magnemite and we lead Oricorio, what we probably want to do is still play X speeds. This might sound a little bit crazy, but I think we still want the X speeds just in case we don't get the proper lead or we lead Oricorio. In the matchups where Oricorio isn't going to be that relevant. So here's like a Magnezone build with Raikou. I don't know if there's as much synergy here or if it's going to be as quality or viable as just playing sort of that Turbo Lightning type strategy. Again, the Lightning type is really interesting right now. There's so many strong cards, and I do feel like Raikou is a decent card. We'll really have to get hands-on with it before we can kind of figure out exactly how good it is compared to maybe just playing something like an Arceus. But in general, I think it has a lot of potential as well. And I think just the Cyrus combos with Raikou is going to open up a lot of win conditions, which I think is, you know, something that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on right now. But anyway, those are kind of the 3 Raikou decks off the top of my head. Again, maybe something comes out in the set as well that's Lightning type that adds to kind of the support here. Maybe the best way to play Raikou is just actually not playing with Oricorio, which could be crazy. And that's something that we'll have to kind of wait and see. There's just so many strong variants of the Lightning type. Inevitably, some are going to be better than others, but they're all probably going to be pretty popular. So we'll have to just kind of wait and see if Raikou ends up seeing play. And that's kind of how I feel about Raikou. So let's kind of eliminate all of this here real quick. And then we'll move on to the next Pokemon, which I think is actually a really interesting one to talk about, which is going to be, let's go and pull this up right here. Where is it? Right here? Perfect. Okay, so the next one is going to be Entei, right? So what's going on with Entei? Entei is probably one of the more interesting Pokemon that I've ever seen come to the game, just because like it confuses me, right? It's like, what are we doing with Entei? I don't, it's hard to know, right? If you look at the fire type archetypes in the season, or in, you know, in the current metagame this season, we basically had Charizard, which was Charizard and Sylveon, and then we had Flareon. And Flareon was played 2 different ways, with either Leafeon and sort of what they call like the Eevee evolution box, or the dog box is what some people call it, which is a decent tempo deck, definitely a solid deck in the format. But the best fire type this season was actually a fast-paced aggressive deck, and that was Turbo Flareon with Magby. And I actually feel like Entei can kind of fit the role of Flareon in a kind of an interesting way, but it does, I guess, add some additional challenges. So Entei has 140 HP, also has Legendary Pulse, Blazing Beatdown, right? 60 damage for 2 energies, but if we have 4 energies on Entei, it does 120, okay? So that's a really interesting mechanic there. How are we getting 4 energies on Entei? Will we often get 4 energies? And like, you know, how does that really work? You know, so that's what we're going to dive into with Entei, a very, very interesting Pokemon. So let's build this out a couple of different ways. Right off the bat here, we have to add Entei EX to our deck list. And then again, like just, well, the first thing we'll build is probably like a turbo fire type deck, right? The first thing that came to mind. So we got to add Magbies, right? And again, it's the same synergy with these baby Pokemon and the legendary beast Pokemon. Not only is this going to ramp up Entei if we're going second and potentially hit for that 120 on turn 3, which could be really good, or on our 3rd turn. And then if we're going first, we can attack still turn 2 with Magby. So I think Magby is definitely a strong partner for Entei, not only to get Entei up to 4 energies, but also just to kind of get it attacking on turn 2 regardless. Now, again, this is kind of all we need. Like, Turbo Flareon doesn't play anything other than Magby and Flareon. It does play a Sylveon because we're playing Eevees anyway. And then I guess it also plays Genetic Apex Flareon to get around to Oricorio, which is probably going to be a pretty significant issue with this deck list. But we have to play this deck a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit less about being less on the high roll side and hitting that combo and dealing a bunch of damage. And it's going to be a bit more about consistency and being a little bit stickier and a little bit more tankier, because I think that's going to be probably one of the bigger things about Entei, is just surviving for quite some time so that we can get those energies onto it pretty properly. So here's the deal here. What I'm probably going to do is add, like, we need an Oricorio counter option here, right? We could play something like a Miltank, but I don't know if we really want to play Miltank. Luckily, there is actually like a somewhat decent fire type basic Pokemon, and that is Torkoal. So I think Torkoal does 70 damage for 2 energies, and then it discards 1, which is kind of tough, but at least it will one-shot Oricorios. And then what we can do here is we can add some Giant Capes for survivability, make all of our Pokemon more HP. And then honestly, what I'm probably going to do is add some Pokemon Center ladies, because I think that it's a little bit underrated. Entei's ability to go to 160, hold on, what do we need? We need lady. Entei's ability to have 140 HP, but 160 with Giant Cape, With the healing of Pokemon Center Lady, it might be able to just stick around in the active spot for quite some time, dealing 60, dealing 60, dealing 60, and then doing 120. And then, you're kind of just steamrolling your opponent a little bit. I feel like it's going to be a really decent option in those types of scenarios. And also Giratina Darkrai with Rocky Helmets and those Darkrai pings is definitely going to be relevant. So we're going to play Giant Caves. We're going to play Pokemon Center Ladies. This is going to help Torkoal survive. It's also going to increase Magby's HP, but it's going to make Entei a little bit tankier. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. I don't know if this is going to be better than Turbo Flareon. That's really the question. It's a bit more consistent, actually, if you think about it, because Entei, just as a leadoff Pokemon, is a bit better, right? Because going second, if Entei's in the active spot, that's totally fine for us because we can just attack turn 2, where Flareon can't really do that. It does really rely on Magby leadoff, and also it's an evolution Pokemon, and it requires 3 energies to attack. So it's a little bit more of a higher payoff, but it's a little bit definitely less consistent than Entei. So this is going to be more of a Turbo Fire deck that's a bit more focused around being consistent in the early game, but being maybe a little bit less strong in the late game. But what we probably do want is some damage modifiers, so let's play Red. And then I'm also going to play Guzma as well, because Giratina Darkrai is really annoying, so that's what we're going to do there. We have the Giant Capes. Now, also, to be fair, we probably want to be really consistent in the early game. We are playing that 1 copy of Torkoal, and Entei going first probably isn't a great leadoff, so I'm also going to play 2 copies of Leaf just to more consistently be able to retreat out in that early game, which I think is going to be definitely pretty important. What else can we do here? Maybe we want to play Sabrina Cyrus here, right? Just why not? There's, you can't really go wrong with playing Sabrina Cyrus in your deck, so let's do that. And then I guess, honestly, like, what else do we want to play? I don't really know. We could just play a Mars. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of filling the gaps here, but this is more of like a Turbo Entei deck. Again, really fast-paced, really aggressive, but a little bit more tanky than you might think. So it's a little bit more of kind of a sustained, tempo-based attacker here with Entei, comboed with that really early game aggression. Torkoal should carry us through Oricorios. With Giant Cape, it can KO an Oricorio, live an attack from potentially a Silvally. However, if we get Revenge KO'd by an Arceus, that could be an issue, but then we just go into Entei, we attack, and then Cyrus up, and then KO, right? So there we go. I think that Entei is a bit underrated, quite frankly. Maybe there's other ways to play Entei, though. It's one of the more interesting, confusing Pokemon to me, is like, how do I want to really play Entei? Do I feel like it's going to be meta? I think it has the potential to be meta. I don't know off the top of my head how exactly we want to play Entei. So I'm going to remove all of these cards, and let's go on to maybe the next way that Entei might be able to see play, which is, you have to bear with me here, because this is definitely going to be more of an interesting deck. But honestly, I think it has a lot of potential. So the other fire type archetype in the this season is like High Roll Fire, which is Charizard, right? By High Roll, I mean it's more of a combo deck. It's really strong, but less consistent. It's more of a late game deck. Charizard is an interesting Pokemon, but actually I think synergizes with Entei more than you might think. So Charizard, at least the Stoke Charizard, that is Charizard EX, it has the Stoke attack, so for 1 energy, it can come in, attach, and then set itself up. So it's not a Pokemon. The upside to Charizard is that it's not a Pokemon that we ever need to attach energies to until it's in the active spot, right? Because it just doesn't matter. There's no way we're getting 5 energies or 4 energies on Charizard until 5 energies until it's like able to unless you stoke, you know what I mean? So it doesn't matter. Like, we can just kind of come in, attach, stoke, and then attack on the next turn and attach to it. So we can kind of independently play Charizard from anything else that we would like to attach energies to and use before we go into Charizard, or after technically. So I think that Charizard actually works kind of well with Entei in a weird way. Let's play a couple of Charmanders, and then we'll play a couple of Charizards. The Stoke Charizards, and of course we have to play Rare Candy. We cannot forget about the Rare Candy here. So this is kind of the shell. But again, what are we doing against Oricorio, right? I mean, Charizard has that issue right now. I don't really know. Like, you could play the non-EX Charizard, but it probably isn't the smartest move because it can't set itself up. This has a 4 energy attack cost, and we probably don't want to play this Charizard because how are we getting 4 energies onto it? It probably, to me, seems like we have to be playing something like a Torkoal yet again. If there's a better option for Oricorio than Torkoal for the fire type, then let me know. Again, Charizard Sylveon has the ability to play Genetic Apex Flareon just like Flareon does because they're playing EVs already. So that's a bit of the tricky part about playing Entei Charizard is like, what are we doing? In the non-EX, Entei has 4 energies in its attack cost. So those are things we just can't really, I can't slide, honestly. We just can't really deal with that. So I think what we have to do is play Torkoal. Maybe we could play Kamala, but I would rather play Torkoal than Kamala, right? So anyway, let's just add 1 Torkoal. But again, it's a little bit scary in case we do lead Charmander and we do lead Torkoal and we aren't able to evolve them or use them. So let's also play Leafs. I think we have to just play Leaf, unfortunately. And then also Sabrina, right? So let's play 1 Sabrina at least because Oricorio exists. And Sabrina's a really, really strong card. I actually still want Giant Capes. I still want Giant Capes just to kind of bring all of our Pokemon up to be a little bit more tanky. And then again, also because Entei's probably going to be chilling in the active spot. We want it to survive. The whole strategy with this deck is to get Entei in the active spot, attach to it, attach to it, attach to it, attach to it, keep attacking, keep drawing cards in the process, which is going to more consistently allow us to draw into that Charizard combo. We want Entei to kind of ride off and be as consistent as possible. We want our opponent to really have to be forced to go through that Entei, and we want to make that to be as difficult as possible. And then once they do go through Entei, then they also will have to go through Charizard, and that's sort of the bread and butter for this deck, and that's why I think it has definitely some meta potential here. So I'm also going to be playing Pokemon Center Lady as just like the other Entei deck. I think that that's sort of the potential for Entei that not many people maybe are recognizing right now. Maybe we play like a Pokecom in here. Like we could cut something for a Pokemon Communications. You could cut something like for like an Iono potentially to kind of get that rare candy combo off a bit more consistently. But I don't mind this deck. Honestly, we could just cut Torkoal and just cut our losses against Oricorio and then play Communications, right? Because again, what are we doing against Oricorio? We don't really know. But this right here would be like a maximum consistency build here. If we lead Charmander, we just retreat into Entei and then we just ride off with Entei until it goes down, and then we just go into our Charizard Stoke and then hopefully live, and then we can hit for 150. And it's actually a pretty decent strategy. I think that this deck definitely has some potential, and I think that Stoke Shining Revelry Charizard actually has quite a bit of potential with Entei that I don't know if we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if it'll be better than Sylveon, but the thing is, you know, Sylveon, it helps Charizard get to Charizard more consistently, but the format right now is definitely heavily dominated by these really fast-paced turbo decks with all of these baby Pokemon. So it's like, you know, we kind of just, like, Entei kind of helps solve that issue a little bit, right? Especially going second, doing 60 damage every turn from your second turn is going to give the deck a little bit of pace while also giving us time and consistency to draw through our deck and then set up Charizard. I actually like this deck a lot more than I did, I guess, in my initial conception of it. I actually feel like this is totally fine. Anyway, that's sort of one of my ideas for Entei. Lastly, for Entei, I have an idea off the top of my head that I just kind of thought of that is definitely a questionable, but you know, we're kind of spitballing here, right? So here's the deal, right? What about, we talked about Magby, but what about Moltres? You guys remember Moltres from Genetic Apex? This Pokemon is hilarious, right? Basically, I actually just posted a meme on my community page here that was like, you know, Moltres had been replaced by Magby, which is funny because Moltres is a legendary Pokemon and Magby is a baby Pokemon. But for most deck lists, Magby is actually a little bit more efficient and better than, you know, Moltres is, right? But to be fair, Moltres isn't a bad Pokemon, and I actually feel like it has some potential to be paired with Entei. And not only can it generate energies for the first couple of turns, so the whole idea here would be, you know, going second, you know, leading off with Moltres or Entei would be decent leads. Moltres will allow us to kind of pile up a bunch of energies on Entei to get it up to that 4 energy mark to deal 120, which definitely does help. But also, Moltres has a decent amount of HP. Both of these Pokemon have 140 HP, and we can force our opponent to go through a Moltres and an Entei, which might not be that easy for them. Again, we're probably going to go ahead and then use the 1 energy attack to generate fire energies for the first couple of turns, but we can just attach to Moltres, right? It's like almost like playing like a baby Shining Genetic Apex Charizard, like a smaller version of it, but a little bit more consistent in its leadoffs because it's only basic Pokemon. This is a strategy that I think some people are definitely kind of sleeping on. We can even attack with Moltres maybe once or twice and then go into Entei. Like, it's honestly something that I'm a little bit interested to test because in theory, it actually seems not that bad. The other funny thing here, though, again, is what are we doing against Oricorio? I know we've been adding Torkoal to our decks, but now we're going to do something a little bit spicy here. We're spicing it up. Let's add a non-EX Moltres. If you guys remember what this Moltres card does, it's actually kind of funny. So this Moltres here, for 3 energies, does 130, but you have to flip tails. It's like a Alolan Executor. It only has 100 HP, but it does 130 if you flip heads. And now, the funny thing here is that the Moltres EX is also flipping heads with its attack, right? And what do we have to help us flip heads on coins? We have Will, so let's play Moltres Entei with Will, right? So not only is this going to allow us to more consistently generate those energies with Moltres, but it's also going to allow us to one-hit KO Oricorios with the small Moltres, and it's honestly doing 130. Like, it's not a, you know, I don't know. We're kind of cooking here, maybe? Who knows? Now, again, we also want Giant Cape. We got to be a little bit tanky because this isn't like the most fast-paced deck in the world. It's kind of a ramp deck. So we kind of want to play that. And then also maybe we want Leaf as well. I don't know if we really need Leaf. It's almost like if we lead Entei, we're leading Entei, and like that is what it is. I don't think we ever really need Leaf to kind of guarantee to go into Moltres, but if we do lead with the non-EX Moltres, that's pretty rough as well. So maybe we do just play a couple copies of Leaf because we have a lot of space in the deck. So we'll do that. Also, I'm still playing Pokemon Center Ladies, again, because I feel like we need to be tanky when we're playing Entei. We need to survive maybe that extra turn, and Giant Cape and Pokemon Center Lady should help us do that. And then let's play like a copy of Red to deal some more damage, because that could happen for sure sometimes. And then we're going to play Sabrina because Oricorio exists. And then honestly, I mean, what else do we need to play? I don't know. Let's play a Guzma. Why not? Or maybe a Mars. I kind of like Mars better. To Mars our opponent to 1 after our first EX Pokemon goes down. We added the full art red. Let's get rid of that for consistency reasons. And there we go. What do you guys think of this one? This is a funny one. I thought about this recently and I kind of wanted to put it to practice. This is Moltres, Will, Entei. People love Will, so I don't know if people are going to be interested in playing like a Will fire type deck, but if you were, I actually feel like this is, again, it has potential. I think Entei is one of the weirdest Pokemon where I just can't really get a read on it. If you guys can comment down below and let me know how you plan to play Entei, I feel like Moltres Entei has as much potential as really any of the other decks. It's more of like a ramp fire deck. And we've kind of built Entei in all 3 of the different ways because Entei is a very flexible Pokemon. We played it in like a turbo deck, we played it in like a mid-range combo deck, and now we're building a ramp Entei deck. And I think that they're all fairly decent options for Entei. I don't know. I'm just kind of brainstorming here. Comment down below what you guys think. Hopefully we don't forget rare candies in these decks like we did yesterday, and you guys will comment about it. But anyway, that's kind of my ideas with Entei, personally. Now, lastly, what do we want to do? I kind of want to do one more thing, and I think if we go back, there was, of course, something else here that maybe we can build a deck on, which is going to be Slowking, right? So Slowking's funny. It's an interesting Pokemon. So 130 HP stage 1 Pokemon, water type, which is kind of beefy. 130 is not bad at all for a non-EX stage 1 Pokemon. That's literally as much as Raikou EX. Discard up to 2 Pokemon tool cards from your hand, and this attack does 50 damage for each you discarded that way. Okay, so 1 energy, 100 damage on a stage 1 Pokemon is actually very relevant. That's actually not that bad. And what's even more funny, and the reason why I want to build a Slowking deck is because we have the new Traveling Merchant announced or confirmed. And this allows us to look at the top 4 cards of our deck and put all Pokemon tool cards you find there into your hand, and then you shuffle all of the other cards back into your deck. This card is very underrated. This card actually, like, I don't know if people really realize there's a lot of tool cards in the deck. For like an 18 trainer deck or really any deck, what you could do is just play a bunch of tool cards, play two Traveling Merchants, and then effectively what we can do is thin out our deck at an extreme rate. This is the biggest sort of thinning mechanic that we've ever had. Like theoretically speaking, you could play like double Sylveon EX, and then you could play a bunch of tool cards, and then you could play Traveling Merchant and have 0 cards in your deck on like turn 2. Which is really funny. But like obviously this is going to allow us to get those tool cards into our hand to then, deal that damage with Slowking, which even makes Slowking that much better. So let's build a Slowking deck real quick, because I think Slowking has a lot more potential. I compared this to Magcargo, but better. I know they operate completely differently as decks, but I think that Slowking is to water type what Magcargo might be to fire type. And I know people love Magcargo. So let's build a Slowking deck. I don't know what we're doing for Slowpoke. Let's just add these 2, because like, I don't know. They're psychic type. It is what it is. We definitely need Traveling Merchant, right? So let's add the new Traveling Merchant for sure. And I think what we still want to do is still play 2 Professor's Research. I don't think there's ever a game or a deck ever where we don't play 2 Professor's Researches. Now we need tool cards, most importantly. So let's play all of the more applicable, tool cards, of course, like Giant Cape. We can play like 2 Rocky Helmets. I think we probably also want to play like Rescue Scarf, just because we're playing such a low amount of Pokemon. So let's play 2 Rescue Scarves as well. And then we want some more. Like, let's just play Poison Barb. I think what we probably want to do is play like 8 or maybe even more, maybe even 10 tool cards here. I think we're going to be banking almost entirely on drawing those tool cards to deal the damage with Slowking. That's what this deck is really all about. It's turn 2, hitting for 100 and hitting for 100 every turn and hoping that's enough to win games. So let's also play like some leftovers. Like, these are all of the generic tool cards that are going to be useful. And this does only leave 2 cards in the deck list. So again, we got to be really consistent here. What does Magcargo run? I think that they run like an Iono, just as like a last ditch effort to draw their evolution Pokemon, because that's definitely going to be important. And then also, we can play Pokemon Communications as well. No Pokeballs in the deck. We're all literally, I don't even think, honestly, like, you have to think, like, the issue with Magcargo is that it can't really thin its deck like Slowking can. And Slowking with Traveling Merchant, theoretically, is going to be able to thin a bunch of cards out of the deck and move really quickly. Like 2 Traveling Merchant, 2 Professor's Research, and 10 tool cards means that a lot of times when we play Traveling Merchant, we're thinning and pulling 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 cards out of our deck, which is absolutely insane. We're guaranteed to start with a Slowking. And honestly, maybe we could play a Pokeball in here, but honestly, this is kind of the build that I'm thinking about for Slowking. This deck has way more potential than honestly I thought it might at first glance. Like when I first saw Slowking, I was like, this card's a meme, but then I saw Traveling Merchant and I was like, wait a minute, like this deck can do something. Like it's oftentimes going to be hitting you for 100 damage on turn 2, like very often. The only downside to this deck is that we don't have any consistent stage 1 Pokemon search. Like we have no way to guarantee that Slowking. So honestly, I think that maybe 2 Pokemon communications might be better than Iono. Actually, I am going to do that. I'm just going to do this because we're oftentimes playing Traveling Merchant or Research. So I'm actually just going to play 2 Pokecoms, and I'm going to play 2 Slowking, 2 Slowpoke, and then 10 dual cards. This deck is actually going to function. It's actually going to be pretty funny. I think this has as much potential, definitely more potential, honestly, than Magcargo. Maybe not. Maybe, I don't know. Magcargo, I kind of sleep on it. It's not that bad. Anyway, here's Slowking, and here's my version of Slowking. Kind of a meme deck, but I wanted to take a stab at it and build it because I know some people were maybe going to ask about it or want to play it. This might be easy because Slowking I don't even think is like a holo rare, so hopefully it should be easy for people to pull Slowkings. And I think a lot of people just have tool cards, honestly. You could play whatever for tool cards, but all of these tool cards technically do provide value and you can attach them to Slowking, so I'm not playing like Steel Apron or Leaf Cape or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, this is legit. This is actually, like, as far as meme decks go, I'm actually kind of afraid of Slowking. Because getting hit for 100 on turn 2 is not going to feel great, and it's going to happen all of the time. So there you go, guys. Anyway, that's the video. So we built, what was this, like 6 or 7 decks, a little bit of a brainstorm session here. The mini set's set to come out in a couple of days, so I really just wanted to kind of make a video like this. Some people, again, in the comments of yesterday's video, you guys really did like sort of the deck building portion, so I just wanted to make a video doing this. And that way you guys can get my opinions on stuff. Things are going to change when the full set comes out. Maybe we get some really broken cards that they didn't even announce in the trailer. I'm actually really excited. When the set releases, we'll do a full set release, and then we'll dive immediately into the metagame, and we'll be analyzing things. I'll be telling you what the best decks are, what the best strategies are. You're going to want to stay tuned for that, so don't forget to like and subscribe, guys. Comment down below if I missed anything. If you have any cool deck ideas, definitely comment them down below. I definitely appreciate it. Let's get out of here, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later, and yeah. Bye.